I'm going to show you how to conduct some tests on your starter motor just using a simple multimeter. Even though I'll be using my Fluke, you can use a bog standard multimeter. Just set onto DC volts, 20 volts. On the voltage drop, you might want to knock it down a touch to the 2000 millivolts to get a very accurate reading. But it's also worth noting that to truly test a starter motor, you really could do with getting your hands on a current clamp, a DC current clamp, one with DC capability. They're not crazy money now, they're not super expensive, but the multimeter test will, give you a very good idea and will be good enough in most cases. But just to get that definitive answer, I would recommend a current clamp. And I'll show you in the video how this can measure the current exiting the battery and also exiting the starter motor as well, so you know exactly what current the starter motor is pulling. Because you can have a situation where you think the battery voltage hasn't dropped too much during starting, so that can indicate a good healthy battery, but it could also indicate that your starter isn't actually pulling enough current, so that's why a current clamp is useful. It's also worth noting that the starter terminal, main terminal, is permanently live, so if you disconnect it for cleaning, make sure you take off the battery negative lead first to avoid injury or stray sparks. And also it's worth bearing in mind that just putting the multimeter leads onto the starter terminal, dependent on how difficult to access your starter is. Just be careful of jewellery, watches, rings, bracelets, all that kind of stuff, so you don't injure yourself. Just take great care in that general area. So that's that done, and we'll go out to the car. And before you test any starter motor, you really have to make sure that the battery is in top condition, because these tests are to establish how much power is available to the starter motor and whether or not it's making use of that. So if you're starting off with a bad battery, well, you're kind of wasting your time doing these tests, because the problem could be from a poor battery. Now, when I'm doing these tests, I don't want the car to actually start, I just want it to turn over. So I've just removed a couple of ECM fuses, so the engine won't actually fire, it'll just turn over. And I'm using this positive post here in the bay as my battery voltage and battery post, and I'll just use an earth connection because my battery's in the boot. I've already checked the battery, we've got a nice healthy voltage, it's a new battery, so you're looking for around about 12.6 volts, 12.5 volts, something like that on your battery. You need to establish that first. So the battery test is already done, so we're going to do a voltage drop test just to make sure that the big connection between the battery, this comes as a main line from the battery in the boot to here, and then a main line again down here, and there's that little fork off there, and that is the big fat starter cable. So I just follow that to the starter motor, and what I'll be doing is I'll be putting the black multimeter lead onto the post on the starter motor. Let's see if I can just focus in on it. It's the big fat post, threaded piece just there, dead center of the picture. So I'll be putting the black lead on there, the red multimeter lead will be going onto this post here, and we're going to see what the voltage difference is between there and there. And on the live side, you're looking for a voltage drop of, they allow up to 0.5 volt. So I'll just press the maximum button, it will record that. Okay, so as you saw, that's right at the limits really of what's acceptable. The total voltage drop on the live and ground side is allowed up to 0.7 volts, so at 0.554 I might still do a little bit of cleaning up of the contacts just to try and bring that down. Okay, so just using a Dremel, bit of carb cleaner and a screwdriver, I've got the small starter connection off there. That's for the starter, that's for the solenoid, goes on there. So that's all cleaned up nicely now, got a good connection there. And then this here, this is the main post where the starter is fed the high current for starting, and I just took off the line, the cable for that, and cleaned that up with the Dremel wire brush, so that's spotless. You can see the size of the cable in there. It's pretty huge. So yeah, it's a huge current that goes through that, so you really want the best connections possible. So so that bit was as simple as that. And then I'll do the same test on the ground side. All I'll be doing there is I'll be getting the red multimeter lead and putting it onto the starter earth, and the starter earth is that cable just down in there, that big fat one there. You just basically follow it back to the starter motor and to the engine block. That's the main cable there. And then I'll be putting the black lead on a known good earth point just there, and I'm looking for less than well, no more than 0.2 volts on the ground side. Okay, so we're set up again. I'll just start the car, or turn the engine over. Lovely, that's an excellent figure that there. So we've got a maximum voltage drop of 0.061 volts. So that means that I can kind of cheat here, even though the live side had a slightly over spec voltage drop of 0.554, was it? This has got such a low voltage drop that the actual total is less than 0.7 volts, so I'm happy with that. The other thing that you need to check is your battery voltage during one of these starts as well. So you want to make sure your battery voltage isn't really dipping below 10 volts, 10.5, something like that. That's your ideal figure. So that's just a standard, just setting your multimeter up on your battery positive post, battery negative post, and measuring the DC voltage during cranking. So yeah, so if you've got a good healthy starting voltage on the battery, it doesn't drop below 10 during the cranking, you've got less than 0.7 volts voltage drop between the battery and starter on the live and ground side. If all that's starting to add up nicely, and as you heard, the engine was turning over quite nicely there, that says to me that really this starter is absolutely fine, and they're the sort of figures that you're looking for. And then just finally, what I'll do, I'll just show you with this current clamp. I'll actually put, it's difficult for me to put it on the starter positive cable, so I'll actually route it onto the negative cable down there. So I'll just clamp it around it like that, and then I'll zero it. There we go. And I'll just turn the engine over, and it will record what the actual current draw is flowing through or flowing back out of the starter motor. And on this car I'd be really looking for it to be, you know, certainly around the 200 mark, something like that ideally. So let's see what that does. So as you saw, that was a very healthy amperage being drawn through the starter motor, over 200 amps. And because it was a minus figure on that, that's because the flow was going up through the clamp meter. and back to ground. So that I'm very happy with that, and that shows there's an excellent current flow being drawn from the battery, going through the starter and exiting the starter. They're the figures for a Volvo D5. Your car, if you've got a small petrol or whatever, you may need much less amperage, so you need to check on what the spec is for your particular car as to what's a normal figure. But for this Volvo D5, I'm very happy with that, and that shows all the connections, and the battery and the starter are absolutely spot on. So I hope you find that useful, and thanks for watching.